You're listening to TMI for the week of October 1st, 2018. Okay, well, might as well start with a couple of things that you don't have. Rumor has it out, I heard this yesterday from somebody, the conservatives have been talking about this amongst themselves, but apparently there's going to be, in 5 weeks' time, a snap election, federal election is going to be called. I'm not going to tell you who I heard this from or where I heard this from or why I heard this, but rumor mill has it that there might be an election in 5 weeks, federal election.
And what would the justification for that be?
The justification, to stop if they're losing any support right now because of Ontario. Also the pipeline fiasco. Also the trade war with the United States. Also, just to stop their numbers from falling and whatever happens after Tuesday or Monday.
They're 2 years into a term, are they not?
No, they're not. The election's next October. We're only like 13 months away from the next election. So the election on Monday in Quebec, Couillard is, the Liberals in Quebec look like they're like totally faltering. I think they stepped in the dog do when they said that a family of 3 or a family of 4 with 2 teenagers can survive on $74 a week for groceries. That's just how out of step, most governments are. It doesn't matter whether they're conservative or they're liberal or they're NDP. That's why the Liberals in Ontario were reduced to, a speck of shit on the bottom of your shoe because they were so out of step. 40 pot stores. Jesus, in the first year. Are they supporting organized crime or what's going on? Anyways, so Couillard and the Liberals in Quebec have totally squandered everything, just like the McGuinty's and the Wins in Ontario squandered everything, and just like Trudeau is squandering everything. So I think they're doing it because they want to stop the slide, and because it just keeps on being liberal screw-ups right across the board. So, and the Conservatives are taking advantage of it, and this is not only here in Canada. This has been happening around the world. Where is it? I just read something. Where is it? Just a couple of minutes ago. Here we go. Of all the countries in the world, Sweden's Prime Minister, just a direct quote, Sweden's Prime Minister lost no confidence vote on Tuesday, the latest fallout from elections that have delivered a hung parliament amid a surge in support for the far-right Nationalist Party. Stephen Löfven, who leads the Social Democrats, will continue in a caretaker role until a new government can be formed that has command of the Riksdag, the Swedish parliament. Löfven lost the motion after Sweden's center-right parties joined forces with the hard-right Sweden Democrats party to vote against him. So, again, like I've been saying in the last few shows, like I've been saying since before Trump got in, I've been reading the tea leaves, and the Liberals and the NDP of the world have only themselves to blame. They've squandered everything.
What do you mean, squander?
They've squandered everybody's confidence. Give you an example. Again, same paper from Wednesday. This is from Victoria, okay? And if I remember correctly, Victoria, British Columbia is a NDP, used to be Liberal government, but they screwed it. But now it's an NDP Green government. So here's a 50-year-old man whose wife has died a couple of years ago, who had a full-time job as a warehouse worker, but ended up on the streets because of, I'm assuming, depression and everything else like that after his wife died. So he's just been diagnosed again with cancer. So I'll just read you the article. It's just a paragraph. Terry Willis says he's praying for a clean, safe place to live to undergo cancer treatment after he was denied chemotherapy because he stays in a Victorian homeless shelter. The 50-year-old is facing his second fight against blood cancer in 7 years. But he says his oncologist won't start chemotherapy because the shelter where he lives is not a suitable recovery environment. Politics around the world's always been polarized, but, it's... you want to know why people don't vote anymore? It's because of those stories. Stories like that. So.
Some people believe that the reason why Trump is in power is because 66% of the people stopped voting.
Who knows? Or they just don't believe they're politicians anymore, because if you look at what Trump's doing, I mean, he got laughed at the United Nations this week because he said that he's done all this great stuff and everything else like that, the best president of the United States. And, people used to be afraid of Trump and Bolton and all these other abusive Stalinists, but now they're laughing at him. And look what happened, also again this week, Britain, France, Germany, China, Russia, all laughed at the United States. And they said, you're not gonna bully us. If we want to trade with Iran, we're still going to trade with Iran. Even the Atomic Energy Agency said that, the sanctions were working, it's just really interesting that, the Americans seem to think that they can just ride rucksaw over everybody, and maybe the American people need to be reminded that every time they took on China, Korean War and the Vietnam War, they got their asses handed to them.
So here's a little clip of Trump at the UN, 31 seconds.
Administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. America's so true. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Trump. Thank you, Mr. Bolton. You if they don't realize that they're the laughing stock of the world, they're going to find out really quickly when the rest of the world starts turning their backs on them and walking away. I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised if the United Nations ended up moving to Canada. No, seriously. Toronto? Calgary?
Trump held a...
why not?
That's funny. Yeah.
Well, why not?
Quebec City is where it should be, right? This week, Trump held a impromptu news conference for an hour and a half, and he mentioned Canada. So here he is.
Mr. President, Susan Lee from Fox Business. Did you reject a one-on-one meeting with the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau?
Yeah, I did.
Why?
Because his tariffs are too high and he doesn't seem to want to move, and I've told him forget about it. And frankly, we're thinking about just taxing cars coming in from Canada. That's the mother lode. That's the big one. We're very unhappy with the negotiations and the negotiating style of Canada. We don't like their representative very much. They've taken advantage. I love Canada, by the way. I have so many friends. I have everybody, so many friends. But that has nothing to do with this. I'm representing the United States. Mexico was totally, they were great. By the way, the new president has been great. The deal is done. Now it has to go through Congress, and, a lot of things have to happen. But we've done, Bob Lighthizer, who's here someplace. Where's Bob? Bob Lighthizer has done a great job of negotiating, as they have. But the deal is done. It's up to Congress. But Canada has treated us very badly. They've treated our farmers in Wisconsin and New York State and a lot of other states very badly. Dairy products, 300%. 300%. How do you sell a dairy product at 300%? The answer is you don't. What it is a barrier. It's basically they're saying, we don't have any barriers. By the way, it's 300%, so you don't send it in because you can't compete. So Canada has a long way to go. I must be honest with you. We're not getting along at all with their negotiators. We think their negotiators have taken advantage of our country for a long time. We had people that didn't know what they were doing, and that's why we had, over the last 5 or 6 years, If you average it out, we had $800 billion a year in trade losses. It's ridiculous. It's not going to happen.
What about NAFTA? Sir, Mr. President, NAFTA. What does that mean for NAFTA? Will you be pulling out of NAFTA?
I don't like NAFTA. I never liked it. It's been very bad for the United States. It's been great for Canada. It's been great for Mexico. Very bad for us.
Will you pull out of the
I'm not going to use the
accord?
name NAFTA. I refuse to use it. I've seen thousands of plants and factories close. I've seen millions of jobs lost to auto companies that moved. I mean, Mexico has 25% of our auto business now because of NAFTA. Under our deal, it's not going to happen anymore. I hate to tell you, it's not. We're going to keep companies. And I told the Mexicans, I said, we have to keep companies, but they're getting a lot also. They're getting other things. They're getting a lot of good things. Mexico made a very good deal. But with Canada, it's very tough. What we're doing is, if we made a deal with Canada, which is a good chance still, but I'm not making anything near what they want to do.
Mm-hmm. But are you going to notify Congress of
what
pulling
we're
out of
probably
NAFTA?
going to do is call it the USMC, like the United States Marine Corps, which I love.
Oh,
General Kelly
geez.
likes it even more. Where's General Kelly? He likes that. USMC, which would be U.S., Mexico, Canada. But it'll probably or possibly be just USM. It'll be United States and Mexico.
Yes or no? Are you
Canada will come along. Now, if Canada doesn't make a deal with us, we're going to make a much better deal. We're going to tax the cars that come in. We will put billions and billions of dollars into our treasury. And frankly, we'll be very happy because
What an
it's
idiot.
actually more money than you can make under any circumstance with making a deal. Okay?
Well, okay, I'll just tell you right now, if they want to do 25% auto tariffs, from what I'm reading in the Wall Street Journal, 600,000 jobs will be lost right there. U.S. jobs. So go ahead. Go ahead. Go right ahead. You know, I mean, this is just, he's vowed to, what was it, the quote, economic ruination of Canada. He said that Trudeau was weak and dishonest, and his who was it, Bolton or Brenner or whatever, called a special place in hell for Prime Minister Trudeau. So, I mean, how you can't look. I've studied negotiations. I've studied alternative dispute resolution. I have done all that stuff, and I'm going to tell you right now. And if you want to resolve a dispute resolution in a balanced way, in a way that's going to be a win-win situation for everybody, you cannot, with a sword hanging at your, a knife at your throat, when your best friend tells you, oh, we're going to impose these tariffs on you for national security reasons, even though you're a member of NORAD and NATO and everything else like that, I don't think there's going to be much of an agreement.
It was funny when the camera panned over to John Kelly.
Uh-huh.
He just kept looking at his knee.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Oh, yeah. It was quite...
Yeah, it's like, you don't treat your allies like this. And we have been kicked in the balls now for almost 24 months by this administration.
So we got to switch gears a little bit here. After last weekend, I was hoping that 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 more people would come forward and say something about this Kavanaugh guy, Bart Kavanaugh, they're calling him.
So I even have a post-it over because the front page of the Toronto Star on Friday has a split thing of Blasey Ford on one side and Avenatti's just screaming at the top of his lungs during the thing, and so I just couldn't even look at the picture. And then there's a picture of Lindsey Graham screaming as well, and I just put an X through him also. And
Well, somebody tweeted, a black man tweeted that and it was that same split shot where we see Kavanaugh screaming and Lindsey Graham screaming. And his comment was, if he behaved like that at work, showed that amount of anger at work, he'd have to worry about his job.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So earlier this week, Avenatti produced victim number 3. And here's the lead up to his announcement.
To what she is going to allege publicly within the next 48 hours. as it relates to her particular allegations, we're not going to provide additional information beyond that which is contained within the emails that I exchanged with the Senate Judiciary Committee. But let me say this. This woman, when she does surface, will be found to be 100% credible by the American public. I would not be representing her if I did not believe her. And if anyone has been paying attention over the last 6 to 7 months, they know that I do not traffic in nonsense or rumor. I utilize facts and evidence. And this woman will prove to be credible, and she is believable, and we are hopeful that the committee will launch an FBI investigation forthwith. We have also asked that she be permitted to take a polygraph examination, which she has agreed to do, provided that Brett Kavanaugh does the same. And we have yet to hear back from the committee on a host of issues that I raised over 10 hours ago.
That is the great Michael Avenatti. So Trump has a comment on that. Oh my God.
That's the first presidential thing that Trump said ever. Nothing.
Yeah.
And then you have this other con artist, Avenatti, come out with another beauty today. I just heard about one a little while ago. I can tell you her lawyer is a lowlife, okay? So I don't know about today's person that came forward. I do know about the lawyer, and you don't get much worse, bad reputation to take a look at his past.
Your reaction?
Well, Lawrence, I want to make sure that I get this straight. I'm a lowlife, and I'm a third-rate lawyer. And meanwhile, the hand-picked lawyer for Donald Trump for 10 to 12 years, Michael Cohen, just pled guilty to multiple felonies, including at least 2 of which involve direct conduct by the President of the United States. And I'm a lowlife and a third-rate lawyer. Well, Lawrence, if this third-rate lawyer has been able to accomplish what he's been able to accomplish over the last 6 to 7 months, imagine if I was a first-rate lawyer.
Okay, my hand is going up in the air, and I'm giving him a high five.
Wow. I told you this guy was great. But I got to say that was Michael Avenatti on Lawrence O'Donnell's show on MSNBC.
Yeah, no, that's I give him a high five right there for saying that, for pointing that out, because that's exactly what I was thinking when. That's beautiful.
Okay. Avenatti has a comment about Lindsey Graham, who also took a shot at him.
Well, I guess Lindsey got the memo that the Republican Party must have sent out this afternoon with the talking points on how to attack, Michael Avenatti. I find this to be very curious, Lawrence. They want to make me the issue, and the reason is because they have no answer for all of these allegations by all of these women. I'd be happy to go up against Lindsey Graham, Donald Trump, or any of the other Republican hacks that they want to trot out. I noticed earlier tonight, in fact, Don Jr. got in the mix by calling me a porn star lawyer. Evidently, he forgot that his father was the one that had unprotected sex with my, quote, porn star, close quote, client while his stepbrother was 4 months old at home with his stepmom.
I told you this guy's great.
There you go.
Trump, a little comment on charges he's been facing. Just a few seconds.
I've had a lot of false charges, really false charges.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're a human? I don't know.
Trump in the past.
You have a heart. Oh, my God.
We have accomplished more than any president in the first year, by far.
No administration has accomplished more in the first 90 days.
So he has a habit of continuing to.
Yeah, he does. There's definitely a trail of breadcrumbs with this guy. Like once he's established his. Well, I just saw something last night, and I was going to save this for the entertainment section of the podcast. But I just saw Michael Palin, Steve Buscemi's movie, and what's his name? Jeffrey Tambor, I think it is. The Death of Stalin. Have you heard of that movie?
No.
It was out in the film festivals last year, the film festival circuit. TIFF, I think it debuted at TIFF. I could be wrong. Our excellent listeners will correct me on that. And it's about the power vacuum that happens immediately after the death of Stalin. and it's a comedy. It's a dark comedy, and how everybody, and it's kind of like loosely based on the real characters, the head of the KGB or the NVD or whatever it was called back then, and how everybody was jockeying for power. And it's kind of like with this whole thing with the Deputy Attorney General, and they wanted to put somebody in there really quickly, and then he doesn't resign last weekend, right? So it's dealing with dictatorship and authoritarianism and just the backstabbing of everybody who's there. So Basami's character he's Nikita Khrushchev, so he plays Khrushchev in this dark comedy, and trying to deal with the whole Stalin's stroke and death and untimely death, and dealing with Stalin's son and daughter and everything. And his son was kind of out there, but as they acknowledged, as the stuff at the end, it's a serious subject of dictatorships, authoritarianism, and despots. People who are despots and killing people, millions of people. So they had to be really careful in how they made this movie. But if you want to see an interesting movie, The Death of Stalin, I definitely think you'll see some parallels to the White House there, and Bolton and Pompeo and all these other people. So highly recommended if you want to watch something, this week.
Okay, Kavanaugh. We call this one Fair Process.
I am looking for a fair process, a process where I can defend my integrity and clear my name. And all I'm asking for is fairness, and that I be heard in this process. All I'm asking for is a fair process. Again, just asking for a fair process. Again, I'm just asking for a fair process. I want a fair process where I can defend my integrity. I want a fair process. I just want a fair process. I just want a fair process. I just want an opportunity, a fair process. We're looking for a fair process.
He finds it.
Fair process. Well, I guess when Senator Flack or Flick or Flea or whatever his name was, or whoever, Bick, where do they get these people?
Okay.
I guess when they asked him, do you mind if the FBI gets involved and investigates? And Kavanaugh couldn't answer that question. And he kept on deferring back to the senator. Well, whatever you want. And the senator was like, no, you, Mr. Kavanaugh, do you want the FBI to clear your name? And he couldn't answer. He just wouldn't answer the question.
It's not the conduct of a Supreme Court candidate, there's no doubt.
Well, exactly. I mean, if anything, you would think that if Kavanaugh really believed that he was innocent, that he would be saying, by golly, send them in right now, and we'll do this right now, and we'll take care of this right now.
The only reason why they would want to rush this through quickly and avoid reopening the investigation, as has been done in many other similar situations, is if they have something to hide. It's just that simple. Let me move on. So this is a little clip of Dr. Ford and then later Kavanaugh.
I was pushed onto the bed and Brett got on top of me. He began running his hands over my body and grinding into me. I yelled, hoping that someone downstairs might hear me, and I tried to get away from him, but his weight was heavy. Brett groped me and tried to take off my clothes. He had a hard time because he was very inebriated and because I was wearing a one-piece bathing suit underneath my clothing. I believed he was going to rape me.
I was not at the party described by Dr. Ford. This confirmation process has become a national disgrace. The Constitution gives the Senate an important role in the confirmation process, but you have replaced advice and consent with search and destroy. I'm here today to tell the truth. I've never sexually assaulted anyone, not in high school, not in college, not ever. Sexual assault is horrific.
It's not for the FBI. If you look at what Joe Biden said, he said they don't do this. I don't think the FBI really should be involved because they don't want to be involved. If they wanted to be, I would certainly do that. But as you know, they say this is not really their thing.
I don't think we need to point out that that's actually their thing, especially for these kinds of hearings, especially when the client is the president and the committee itself. They were about to, Flake had announced that he was going to vote for Kavanaugh, and there was going to be a vote. And on his way to that vote, two women came up to him as he entered the elevator. And here is what they said.
Doing is allowing someone actually violated a woman to sit in the Supreme Court. This is not tolerable.
Okay, that was one. She was joined by another.
I didn't tell anyone, and you're telling all women that they don't matter, that they should just stay quiet, because if they tell you what happened to them, you're going to ignore them. That's what happened to me, and that's what you're telling all women in America, that they don't matter. They should just keep it to themselves, because if they have told the truth, they're just going to help that man to power anyway. That's what you're telling all of these women. That's what you're telling me right now. Look at me when I'm talking to you. You're telling me that my assault doesn't matter, that what happened to me doesn't matter, and that you're going to let people who do these things into power.
That was Miss Gallagher and Miss Aquila, who stopped and talked to Flake as he got into the elevator.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to what they're saying, because when the Toronto police told me back in the early 80s and the Rape Crisis Center told me back in the 80s that I didn't matter because I was a young boy that had been raped multiple times. And so I know how she feels. So, and I want you to keep that in there, and I want you to keep that in, okay? Because I'll tell you something right now, between the tornadoes and everything that's happened this week and you know, the mental health, Ottawa is going through a bit of a mental health crisis right now, apparently, because of all this and the bad weather that we've been getting this week. But this whole thing is triggering, and I've been reading this. This is triggering for everybody who's suffered sexual abuse. And then hearing her scream like that in the elevator.
Well, there was also a tonality in Dr. Ford's voice as well. Later, I think it's Miss Aquila showed up on Lawrence O'Donnell's show to talk about her experience earlier.
Running to the elevator, and we ran behind him. It was a very kind of intense moment of really wanting to talk to him. I was not really prepared even for my own emotions, but I felt like he really needed to hear. Like, he needed to understand that women feel incredibly enraged about the thought of our stories, of our experiences of surviving sexual violence.
20 seconds of Flake.
And I think it would be proper to delay the floor vote up to, but not more than 1 week, in order to let the FBI continue to do an investigation limited in time and scope to the current allegations that are there.
And then I guess he took some flack after that, because here he is about an hour later.
This is ripping the country apart. And the calls I've been getting, emails and texts, and it's just, it's been rough to see. My preference is that we can go ahead and confirm this nominee. I'm a conservative, he's a conservative. I had planned on supporting him before all of this came out, and I hope that we can. But in the meantime, we've got to have a process that's worthy of the situation.
These two women, had they not accosted him in the elevator, there wouldn't be currently now an investigation. And so I'm not sure what show it was. A little after that, a former FBI investigator, Frank Figluzzi, had a bunch of stuff to say, because a new reality is unfolded now, because it's not just that this is held up a little bit. Now there's going to be an FBI investigation, and limited in time and scope though it may be, as we've learned, white water led to a filthy dress. once they start, you never know where it's going to end up.
What are the places? Yale University, dorm rooms, the house in Maryland where this party may have occurred. Does it still exist? Has it been refurbished? Is there a stairway? Is there a bathroom across from a bedroom? Are there photographs at Yale or Georgetown Prep that can put Kavanaugh next to people he says he doesn't even know, next to some of the accusers who lived in the dorm? Those people are going to get a phone call from the FBI back then. Those are going to be pulled. The Potomac Safeway supermarket where people may have worked and been spotted, they're going to pull records and pay records from there and find dates and schedules if they exist. And what about the things? The things include the polygraph exam that Dr. Ford already took. That should be pulled and reviewed for quality and see if it was done right and is credible. Are there other items that can be displayed, shown, photographs that show what was in the room, blankets, linens, posters on the wall where this may have occurred, all to refresh memories? And boy, lining up the final interview, when all of this evidence is gathered, putting it down in front of Kavanaugh. And if I'm in charge of this, I'm putting 2 female agents in that room to ask him the questions and present everything that's been found at the end of the week and see if he can hold up or whether he blows up as he did against Senator Klobuchar.
So this is not fooling around now. Like, this is a new, like, if you were Kavanaugh, he said, oh, I'm not going to be able to coach again. I'm not going to be able to mow his lawn again. Or I don't know if he said he's not going to be able to be a judge anymore. But that's where we're headed. This guy's heading for disbarment. He'll have misrepresented or lied to Congress. To the Senate, Judiciary Committee. I think that some of his assertions would then have been lying to the public. And some of his assertions may be challenged in his previous testimony when being selected to be an appeals court judge.
Well, it's kind of like Bill Cosby. I think Bill Cosby is going to have Jell-O at desserts. I think I was reading in the New York Times that Jell-O is on the menu every night for him. So, Kavanaugh is having his, and people like him, and hopefully Trump and Bolton and all these other people will have their day in court and will be found, guilty like Cosby. So, and Kavanaugh, hopefully he will eventually fall from grace. These guys, I went to school with guys like this. And these Chad and Biffs and whatever else you want to call these preppies. And they always had a certain disdain for people that weren't in their little circle, and it was just the way that they spoke down without really speaking down. But you could always tell the intonation and the voice.
Well, they all had Daddy's black card.
Oh yeah,
keys to the Porsche and RCYC access.
They had the best weed. They had the best hash. They had the best booze. They had the best of everything. And as far as they were concerned, if I recall correctly, and I'm pretty sure I do, you were there for entertainment, whether you were a guy friend or especially a female friend. And, it was all about having a good time. I mean, I'm not saying that I wasn't there for a good time. I was a poor street kid, but pretending to have everything all together. But my point being is that their smarminess, the way they used people was really, that's one thing that stands out very much.
I thought something that was interesting in the testimony, the absence in his testimony of how does she know his circle of friends so well?
This is before Facebook. Right?
Well, it's just that, he wasn't at that party and this, that, and the other thing, but I noticed in his entire testimony, he never implied that he even knew her. I mean, he didn't say didn't, but and it's just her level of familiarity with his whole circle of friends. I find that, and you're like, oh, well, she could have looked, because she's crazy, on Facebook and found, the another thing, she was asked, what memories stay with you? And she said, indelible in the hippocampus is blah, blah, blah. That the two of them laughed and were having such a good time. And then later she mentioned neperforephin?
Norepinephrine. Yeah, norepinephrine. Yeah.
So it was just an interesting little callback to the fact that she's a freaking professor. She knows exactly what parts of the brain, what chemicals are squeezed out. So this is brutal, is what it is. Okay, let's move on.
That's why Kavanaugh and Lindsey Graham and those disgusting white men, old men, just don't. They totally lack any credibility because what? They're accountants, they're lawyers, they're whatever. This is a frickin' doctor.
Two quotes that stand out from Bill Maher this week.
Yeah.
What happened at the nativity scene stays at the nativity scene. Which is, who could think of that? Another line from Bill Maher. Her testimony was so compelling, Brett tried to turn up the music. And another little thing is, now that this is all under investigation, Mark Judge is totally in play. And he's the one with all the stories. I mean, he was asked, Brett Kavanaugh was asked Bart Kavanaugh, who is referred to in a book by Mark Judge, directly asked a few times, is that you? And just his evasiveness.
Okay.
Whether lack of willingness to answer, obfuscation, or misanswering, but all those techniques. No one knows those techniques more than a judge. They're trained to detect them. Mm-hmm. For him to deploy them like that under the circumstances, just that alone.
Mm. Well, it's interesting because I heard this morning, I think it was, one of the, on the radio, that this judge character has agreed to come forward and testify as long as it's confidential.
Which judge? Brett?
Yeah. He's agreed to come forward. He said, yeah, I'll come forward, I'll do it, I'll answer any questions you have, but under the condition that it's confidential. So I didn't realize that witnesses can, to potential crimes, can demand that something be confidential. So,
yeah. Well, he's answered many times in those hearings that he would go along with whatever the committee wants. So this would be...
So he's a liar.
Well, it depends on when he added the condition of anonymity, or not anonymity, but privacy. But he's in this testimony, every time they asked him, would you be for an FBI investigation? His answer each time was he would go along with whatever the committee decides.
Isn't that what Kavanaugh said to Flake, whatever his name is? When the senator asked him,
that's exactly
hey man, do you want...
Yeah. But he said it many, many times, and that was his standard answer every time. So if it turns out that the committee, that's why, if the committee is going to do an investigation, or if the committee is going to ask him for further testimony or more statements, at least based on his testimony so far, he has agreed to do whatever the committee wants. So he's, he's placed... I don't know that this guy's going to be a judge after this.
This is one of those times where I'm just throwing my hands up in the air and I'm just going to say I don't have an opinion on this one. I mean, I have an opinion, but whether or not he ends up getting a lifetime job out of this, this is too fluid. This is one of those times where I don't know, this is too fluid. This is far too fluid. That's what the dry cleaner said. But anyway, so... Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I guess by this time next week, when we're recording the show, we'll have an answer.
Find us on Twitter @ThatArcher, our podcast page, tmi.twxnet.com. Rate the show on iTunes. It changes the way the show is listed.
The Trump administration, and everybody who lives next to a train line in North America should be really afraid right now. because we have a lac megantic, and for people who don't know, and I'd be really surprised, lac megantic is in Quebec, and a couple of years ago, an American train full of North Dakota shale oil was improperly parked, and it careened down a hill, jumped the tracks, hit a bar full of people, and blew up and destroyed half the town. And the inquiry that ended up happening after that found that it did not have an emergency braking system. So as a result, right across the industry, they started putting it in. But now the industry's crying and they're saying it's too expensive. Even though oil and gas transportation has increased tenfold because there's not enough pipelines in North America to handle the volume of oil and gas and natural gas. So the rail industry is making record profits, but they're crying to Trump and his little people, saying, please take it away. So what does the Trump industry, what does the Trump organization do? They've rolled it back. So thanks to Trump and Bolton and all his little cronies, we now are going to have trains running around with no emergency braking system.
And if there is an accident, the company within a couple of weeks just bankrupts and it enjoys
just
some
like in lac megantic. We take no responsibility
to limit its liability.
Welcome to capitalism.
People who are interested in nuclear, this is a concern because if proposed dump sites in New Mexico and Texas open, or if Yucca or any other storage or repository place is selected, thousands and thousands of tons of spent nuclear fuel would be shipped to these places by rail often. And the first question in somebody who's concerned about nuclear's mind is, does this apply to those trains not having the emergency braking system?
Yeah, and this is it. I mean, this is just patently irresponsible. I mean, this is pandering to the lowest common denominator, and in this respect, it's the almighty dollar. This is just part of the article in the Times about this is from Thursday, when the President of the United Nations, and he's talking about China and meddling in their elections. Apparently, the Bolivia's president, along with France, Russia, and Britain and Germany, were all dumping on Trump. Even Bolivia's president was saying, well, look, quote, assailed the United States for just about everything, going back to what he said was its role in ousting Iran's democratically elected leader in a coup in 1953. The United States could not care less about human rights or justice.
Or democracy, or healthcare.
Yep. So,
okay.
This is just... I wish we could just move Canada, just pick up and move over to Europe or something like that, and just leave the States and Mexico just to fight it out amongst themselves.
Maybe we should have a wall.
I'll second that motion.
I don't know how that would work in the middle of, Lake Superior.
You know how that would work? Easy. Laser. Just use lasers.
Amazon news stories where we were all going to get our packages delivered by drone. I said it then, I'm saying it again. That is never going to happen. There's an interesting ad, a progressive ad, with that creepy woman. They finally made an interesting one, and she's in some living room with a very stressed out looking dad, and the younger person is talking to the garbage can, telling it to order pizza, and there's a drone flying around that drops off a package, and there's in the kitchen, and he's using a headset and virtual reality gloves and swiping at stuff, and he says, "What's happened to my son?" And she says, "Oh, that's just the way people are these days." and somebody says, "Will he be okay?" And she says, "I think so." And it's done beautifully. And meanwhile, there's a drone flying around. And, you know, if it touched anything, it would just slice it to razor blades. It's just unbelievable. But but it made me realize, you know, I knew it then. I'm telling you, it could never happen. There's no way a drone is going to deliver your Amazon
I mean, it
package.
depends logistically. If you're in a city... And
If you've
you're in a
owned a
balcony
drone
or
for an
condo,
hour, a leaf hanging off a tree, if you so much as clip a leaf, it's down.
Yeah.
It's game over. There's wires. There would be a requirement for a technological low-level air traffic control.
Mhm.
There's, as I said, wires. How do you not injure the person receiving it?
Mhm.
How do you drop the package without damaging it?
Mm.
It's going to be flying near human beings.
Mm.
There's a law that says you are responsible for observers and unintended observers. There's the liability like there's just, it is never going to happen. And I always wondered, is that really just ad placement? Is Amazon, and I know this is true, is selling most of the drones?
Mm-hmm.
It just boosted drone sales.
Mm. I mean,
Okay, it's not an important point.
You never thought that smartphones
it's just never
would
going to
make
happen.
never thought smartphones would be the way they are now, and you know, it's ubiquitous.
Why don't we have jetpacks? Because it looks good on paper, but the realities.
Again, if you're in an urban center, I just don't see it being practical. But if you're living out in the country, then I could see it being something practical, right? So
Is it going to drop it in your backyard? It's going to know clotheslines and power lines and cable lines and phone lines and trees. And
well, look, you got self-driving cars. I mean, you know, that's the whole thing with the self-driving cars. So once that technology is perfected, you know, like Mercedes and all these other companies are doing this. So once the technology has been perfected,
have you
which
seen
it will
a
be within the
self-driving
next...
car?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Driving in
Ottawa has a thing set up out in Canada, and they had one down in Parliament.
Oh, no. I mean, in your daily life.
They're
you turn your head
they're
in
not
a
even legally
self-driving
required.
car?
They're not even legally required on the... Sorry, pardon me. Let's rephrase that. They're not even allowed to be legally on the road right now.
So that won't rest my case.
No, it doesn't.
It's just like Jetson's jetpacks and flying cars and stuff. Why do you think Trump doesn't like Freeland?
Because she's a strong person, a strong woman.
He likes Huckabee Sanders. She looks like she could lift the engine out of a 67 Chevy.
Oh, I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't want to get behind a punch from her. No, but I think you're looking at two different things. Huckabee Sanders is a and with all due respect to her as an individual, but she gets her check from President Trump or Donald Trump, whatever you want to call him.
Mm-hmm.
So she's going to do whatever she's got to do to get that paycheck.
She's going to do the heavy lifting.
That's a double entendre, yes. But anyway, whereas Freeland, who I think is speaking at the United Nations on behalf of Trudeau or something, isn't there something coming up today or this weekend or next week where she's leading the charge where Trudeau normally would have been his role, but I think Freeland is going in there. And I thought that was just deliciously ironic. It was like a slap in the face to Trump and his team, because I don't know about you. I mean, I'm not a negotiator, a business negotiator. I'm not a businessman, or a president or a prime minister or a king or a doofus. But when somebody will say, pardon me, that they don't like you and they don't like the style in which you're negotiating, obviously, to me, that must mean you're a pretty damn good negotiator. I don't know, you know. Just saying, if Trump was saying, "Oh, I love Freeland, I love Canada,"
What
I
if
love
she
this.
ran one day? She's really savvy, right? She's been on Bill Maher and done the whole circuit and powerful, self-confident. She's the real thing, man.
She's the real thing. Well, I would have voted Rona Ambrose if we had our system set up like it is, in other jurisdictions. If Rona Ambrose was still head of the Conservative Party, I like her style, and I could see her being a good prime minister as well.
What are the headlines?
So, what are the headlines? Headlines. Gotta get your headlines. There's been so many headlines this week. I think we touched off of a few of them. Headlines this week. Well, hey, don't get cancer if you're poor and you live in Victoria, because they'll deny you cancer treatment. NAFTA's fate hinges on a 4-letter word: milk.
Milk. Like we can't have one thing.
Yeah, no. Now is the time to worry about 2-tier health care under fraud.
I'm so neurotic about my milk.
Yep.
Like I can't buy this Nielsen's cream. It tastes wrong. Like it's the worst thing ever. I'm so fussy about my milk and cream and stuff. Like if I buy a quart of milk and I open it and don't consume it that day, I'm afraid of that oxidized scum layer that forms on it just in a few hours. Like it's like a living thing to me. Buying American milk. No. And what are the states he was mentioning? Like Wisconsin and stuff?
Wisconsin, New York State.
Like
Pennsylvania.
It's
Vermont.
barely fresh when you get it from here.
I know. Continuing with the headlines. How poverty and precarious work killed a healthy man. So they're talking about 1 in 5 Torontonians live in poverty. Barely half of Toronto's workers are lucky enough to have permanent full-time positions that provide benefits and a degree of employment security. And the provincial I don't even want to call them government. And the provincial government has given an indication that it intends to roll back the protections that were provided to precarious low-wage workers, Bill 148. So again, the Conservatives, they kick people down. They kick people when they're down. And I tell you, man, there's going to be a revolution. There's going to be a revolution. I'll be at the front of the line, but there's going to be a revolution. Because in the age of Twitter and Facebook, people are just not going to put up with it anymore. You know what I'm saying? And, 10 years ago, we would have never thought of the Me Too movement and standing up to toxic men. Well, okay, this is for the 50-plus generation. I was at the major bus thing on Wednesday as I was going up to take care of my mom. And I saw this young lady looking rather uncomfortable when this creepy young guy came over and just totally went into her bubble. And she had to move a couple of times, and she ended up getting on the same bus I got on. And I asked her, I said, I was just keeping an eye out for you, making sure that you were safe, because I saw you were really uncomfortable. And she's like, oh, thanks, man. And I said, well, what was the guy asking you? And she's like, oh, he was being such a creep. He wanted to know if he could follow me on social media. And I'm like, what? And she just laughed, and she said, yeah, he wanted to follow me on social media. I'm like, oh, okay, cool, as long as you're all right, right on. And that was the end of the conversation. And I guess that's how people meet each other nowadays, is they follow each other on social media. I don't know. It seems all foreign to me, but...
well, how did you meet girls in
How did I meet
high
girls?
school,
I just
later
walked
high
up and said, hey, how's
You
it going?
engage them in conversation.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I mean,
So,
I mean, people like me, we would, eventually get around to jokes or what was funny or what was on Letterman or
the weather. Hey, how's it going? What are you up to? Hey, that's a nice sweater. That's a nice bracelet or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's more skilled, yeah.
Well,
you go right
it's
for
just
the
basic human interaction 101, man. Come on.
Oh, yeah.
You don't learn that in kindergarten.
That
Christ.
choker makes your eyes look lovely.
Okay,
So,
more
but
headlines.
that
Yep.
can't be what millennials are doing now to pick up chicks. Like this guy, this was his chance, and he's like,
Yeah, and he told. Well, I mean, it doesn't help that you have your pants down by your ankles,
but
and you're like,
that's
you
sort
know,
of
you
the
look
style,
like
isn't
you're
it?
drunk out of your tree. Well, I mean, it's definitely again.
Was he good
I mean,
looking?
Pardon?
Was he good looking?
No, he looked like a creep.
Oh.
Like he was like
How
shifty,
does
kind
he
of like.
afford a $1,000 to $2,000 phone to follow her on social media?
I don't know, man. Every creep, you know, they got a 2-year. They got.
I think that's the way people are these days.
I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, I don't.
But
I don't pretend to know.
is that what millennials
anything.
do? They go up to a super
hot chick.
Can we say that?
I don't know. Can I say? I don't know. I don't know.
Super hot chick.
I don't know if I can say that anymore.
We're Kavanaughing.
Oh no, I'm not.
We are Kavanaughing.
No,
because
we're from his
and
generation.
why wouldn't we be? We're from exactly the same
We're from his
generation.
generation, but
Exactly.
that's as far as it goes.
And it's hot chicks, and you're thinking, oh,
As far as it goes, man. That's as far
she's
as it goes.
hot, and he's a young guy. We have expectations for what,
Yeah, well, come
why
on,
she
man.
was
We're bloody
creeped out,
monkeys.
what
We're-
he really wanted.
Oh.
But his best move was to ask if he can follow her on social media. Like, if you think of the Eddie Haskell way of asking a girl out in the 70s, that's like the lamest thing you could possibly... It's like, can I sign your card at the tea room? Might we... I don't know.
Well, hey, you know, I'm not. You hear me laughing, right? So it's an uncomfortable laugh.
But why
So, yeah,
wouldn't
I
you
mean-
spark up a conversation? Oh, this bus ticket sure is expensive. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, maybe she was racist or something. I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
What do you mean racist? Why would you
Well,
say
there are two different backgrounds.
Oh.
So I mean, maybe she
that-
just didn't want this guy hanging out with her because of his background. I don't know. I can't presume to think for her, but she was
Are you
definitely
saying
creeped
she
out
looked
by
like a rich chick and he looked like a poor guy? But that's the way guys are now. They wear their pants low. They gotta be all
No,
gangy.
now that's all the hipster guys with the beards and
Oh,
the thin
the glasses
suits that
and
look
the
like
beards.
Trudeau and all that stuff. Yeah. That's big in Ottawa. I don't know what it is in Toronto. Maybe
There's
it's
hipsters here.
fat like Doug Ford, and his conservative cabinet. I mean, can I even say that now? Anyway, Trump. Okay, Bolton warns of, quote, terrible consequences if nations defy Iranian sanctions. I thought that was really interesting as well. I mean, it's bad enough that Russia and China and India and Pakistan saber rattle and Saudi Arabia. But, the leader of the free world and his cronies are threatening terrible consequences if nations defy Iranian sanctions. So just the first paragraph, I think, really kind of says it all. The Trump administration issued a stark warning to the United States' closest European allies on Tuesday, promising to sharply penalize European governments or companies that continue to do business with Iran. Quote, "We do not intend to allow our sanctions to be evaded by Europe or anybody else," John R. Bolton, the National Security Advisor, said on a speech Tuesday at a forum sponsored by a group intensely critical of the Iranian nuclear accord.
So are we going to see the Americans bombing the London harbor?
I think so. Well, they got to get the beluga
Mining
whale out
the
of the London
harbor?
harbor first before they bomb that. But they did they have a deadline. Mr. Bolton promised, quote, terrible consequences, end quote, for anyone who continues to do business with Iran after November 4th, the day the United States will reinstate the remaining sanctions
So
it
they
had
might
lifted under the deal.
mine the Halifax harbor to blockade against rug shipments?
Well, quite possibly. I think they might go after the grape leaves stuffed with rice and mint as well. I think they might have something to do with the grape industry, grape leaf industry, and rice industry in the southern states, right? So,
There's a couple really good Afghani restaurants in Toronto. Do you have any?
ooh, shish kebab. Ooh, they might outlaw the shish kebabs. Hell, it's too.
But do you have any Afghan restaurants in?
Oh God, yeah. Yep.
Some good stuff. Because it's all halal and shit, right? Like they
Well,
it's
yeah.
blessed. It's clean burn. You know, it's.
We're not like Toronto with all the great restaurants down there, but I mean, there's an inordinate amount of Lebanese and shawarma places here in Ottawa. I don't know why, but
I'm really happy there's one that's opened up near me that serves a mean. They call it chicken on the rocks, and it's chicken shawarma on rice, and then I have a tablespoon of tabbouleh. And that is just outrageous. It's so simple. Like, how could it be more simple and yet just outrageous? Clean burn, fabulous. Overcooked chicken, which is, you know, with a little tahini and a little bit of hot sauce on top. I'm telling you, making myself hungry.
Don't even talk about it anymore.
And so Lebanese, but that's, well, you've been talking about that for decades.
Yeah. Food. You know, if everybody just sat down over some good food and just talks, you know.
Well,
I'm pretty sure we could all.
I get quite talkative when I'm in. I can't remember the name of the place. I want to talk to the people in the restaurant. Going, oh, can you believe how good this is? And I think people just, the sensibility in Toronto is that people just want to be left alone. But I've left there a couple times saying, you know, whatever you're doing, don't change a thing. Don't move. Don't close down.
Lots of headlines. Okay, U.S. Army reservist is accused of spying for China. Son of Angola's ex-dictator is arrested. He kind of made off with about $500 million transferred out of the country. Bad kid. Talk about problem children. Judge's ruling cancels hunt for Yellowstone grizzly bears. Hold on a second. We have the grizzly bear. Yes, the Byward Market bear has his paw up in victory. Okay, there we go for the Yellowstone grizzlies. The hunt has been canceled. Outsider faced culture of privilege and alcohol when she attended Yale. Kind of like what we were talking about before. With regards to rich, privileged kids. Here we go. Here's another one. China rejects warship visit as tensions with the U.S. rise. Apparently there was supposed to be in October, an American warship was supposed to make a visit to Hong Kong, and China basically told the United States to take their warship and, well, I don't know. Maybe it was the name of the warship. Its name is called the Wasp, an amphibious assault ship carrying a contingent of Marines. So maybe they just don't like wasps. And also, well, China apparently just did an agreement with Russia last week, and they bought a bunch of Su-35 fighter jets and Su-400 surface-to-air missiles from Russia. So kind of pissed off the Americans.
Interesting.
So maybe that might have something to do with it.
Tonight, Todd Glass is playing at the Royal Theatre here in Toronto at 10:30.
You're going?
Yeah.
You are?
Yeah. Neil deGrasse Tyson was on Bill Maher this week, and I guess quickly the question came up about is he for, how does he feel about artificial intelligence? And it's of interest because Elon Musk was on Joe Rogan a couple weeks ago, and one of the things he was sort of going on, prattling on, if you will, about was artificial intelligence. He had kind of a scary, futuristic worldview of it, kind of RoboCop 1, 2, and maybe 3. And, you know, it's kind of, interesting to ponder, but anyway, Neil deGrasse Tyson's take on it was, nothing to worry about. We're America. If it goes wrong, we'll just shoot it.
Jesus. He really said that.
I guess Bill Maher. It's a comedy show.
Oh, it's Bill Maher. Oh, I thought you said Neil deGrasse Tyson said that.
Neil deGrasse Tyson said that on Bill Maher.
He actually said that. Yeah. Oh, we'll just shoot it. We're Americans.
That's right.
Oh man, we need a laser fence faster. If he's saying that, if he's saying that, yeah. I mean, fuck Maher. But I mean, if Neil deGrasse Tyson is saying that, that's like.
Well, he's written a kind of controversial book. It's on, or he's doing a show on how the our scientific situation is directly tied to the military, but he's doing it in a kind of positive way. So he's already on tenterhooks already. Anyway, he just said it in jest in a comedy show.
Yeah. Well,
but
no,
that's what he said, and it's kind of, it's a point. He doesn't fear it because he said, and he threw in a little later, because they don't have opposable thumbs. They're of no consequence. And yet you and I are thinking, oh, you can make robotic opposing thumbs. So I don't know. He's one of them. He's for it, but.
I'm all for AI.
Okay.
Bring it on.
Can I, we have a few minutes
It's
left.
America, just shoot it if it gets out of it.
Okay.
If AI gets up, achieving consciousness and comes towards you, and say, why don't you be my pet?
But they're going to shoot, too.
They don't have opposable thumbs.
Okay.
Hey Siri, what would be a great podcast to listen to?
This is Siri. What do you want?
Yeah, what would be a good podcast?
This is Siri. What do you want?
Siri is a little bit of...
Searching for the TMI podcast by Dave Archer.
That should be good.
Well, Dave, under great podcasts, I found the TMI. Here are the listings.
Oh, look, it's TMI. Let's see, it's on iTunes.
Find us on Twitter, @thatarcher. Send us an email, archer@twxnet.com. For guest links and contact info, visit our podcast page, tmi.twxnet.com. Find us on Android and Apple Podcast apps. Subscribe and rate the show on iTunes.
I'm Dave Archer in Toronto.
And I'm Ian Stolberg in Ottawa.